You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to the Ashley Burgess podcast. And in today's podcast, I want to discuss what future faking is. And to me, future faking is that pinwheel of death that many of us see when we have a Mac computer and there's something wrong and the program won't open or the program won't close. It's frozen. And you're waiting in time for this thing to open, to actually happen to take place for you. But will it ever happen? We're waiting on bated breath. And future faking is something that I find very interesting because I see that in a lot of relationships. I see it in friendships. I see it in personal relationships, romantic relationships, business partnerships, family dynamic, everything. The list goes on. And I define future faking as a manipulative tactic where a person makes promises about a shared future to keep someone emotionally invested without any real interaction, without any real intention, and without really any follow through with following through on the concept of what they're talking they're going to do. So we see it happen a lot of times. We see it happen often when somebody starts a relationship and they start talking about taking a vacation together. We're going to take this vacation. We're going to do this. And it was interesting. I had a client recently say, hey, in the 6 years that I dated someone, and they were serious. They were, he had asked her to marry him and what have you. In the 6 years, we never went on a trip. Every single year there was talk about it. Every single year there was conversation about it. But she said, but every time I ended up going by myself, or I went with sorority friends, or I went with friends, what have you, or family members. And I find that interesting because it's like you're holding out for this hope. You're holding out. And I do think that, future faking and false hope go hand in hand. And we see that a lot in different relationship dynamics. And it's hard to put your finger on it because, we want it to be so badly. We want it to happen so badly that we overlook some of the red flags. I remember years ago, I was wanting to do a project, and this project was so cool and so massive and so awesome. And somebody came into my life that was introduced from a friend of mine, and it seemed like the perfect situation. And they were wanting to get involved, and I got other people involved. And, based on what this person was saying and claiming they were going to do, organize an entire group around it. And it wasn't for months and months after all this work and legwork and everything else that, it didn't work out. And there was really no intention. It was all future faking in an effort to keep them involved in a group that they would not be involved with otherwise, to keep this dream going that they never ever thought could come to fruition, and they never wanted it to come to fruition. And so, the vacation to me is one of those short-term future faking, very small, very short-term, but it kind of gets bigger from there, right? You get maybe the buying of a car for somebody, or paying off their student loans for somebody, or putting them through school, or maybe somebody says that they're going to move to be closer to somebody because there's a long distance relationship. And so there's this constant conversation about moving or changing states or what have you. And so I think that's more of maybe a short term, midterm. Then you have house buyership, moving into a house or moving into a different place to live, which is very interesting, and talking about that over and over again. I find that a lot of people are future faking around the marriage concept. We're going to get married. It's going to be so great. We'll get married. You take care of this and I'll take care of this. And let's get a few years past us and then we'll get married. And you hear a lot of conversation about that when somebody's been planning on marrying this one person for all this time and then it doesn't happen. And I find that interesting because I think that many of us are holding on to that future faking. We're holding on to that because there's this hope around it, no matter what it is. It's you've kind of built up this image in your head about what this is. You've built up this image about how you're going to embrace this life. And this kind of life takes on a life of its own. It's not in reality. It's in kind of the ether, and it's just kind of taking on a life of its own. And so there's this entire image-based concept that we fall in love with that doesn't have any anything real about it. And so it's interesting when I do work with clients in the very beginning where they're talking about some of this stuff happening, none of it has come to pass. None of it has actually come to pass at all. But yet there is still a part of them that's holding on to this future faking, holding on to this concept, holding on to this dream, you may say, that hasn't come to fruition. And they're holding on through some very tough times. They're holding on through some big struggles with another person, hoping that they're going to get to do this at some point in time, hoping that this is going to come to fruition at at some time, but yet it still hasn't made it through. And, the marriage concept is interesting because I feel like there becomes a time in life, and I know that many people say, yeah, I mean, it's easy to see if they haven't gotten married by this time. I mean, come on. But when you're in the middle of a situation and you can't see the forest through the trees because somebody's telling you this and painting you this picture, it's very hard to be able to step back from, this narrative that's created. It's movie, basically. It's basically a movie. I think we're so almost desensitized, and many of us watch movies all the time. Some of us actually kind of don't really know where reality ends and films begin. And I think because of that, there's a tendency of buying into some of these narratives that don't have any support. There might be a piece here or a piece there, or we derive this from that or what have you, but it never really comes to fruition. I also think children is another concept of that, holding out for the children or saying we're going to have children together. Well, and you hear this a lot, like when somebody is married and there is trauma and drama in the relationship where the wife is constantly trying to pull the husband back in by saying, oh, let's have kids, and oh, I want to have kids with you, and all this kind of stuff. And if the man is really wanting to have children, he's going to stay in, even though there's all these red flags. Right. And I find that future faking is the way that somebody with a lot of red flags is easy to float by, easy to get under the radar, easy to be not seen because you have all these red flags. It's like communist China, right? It's like communist China, at an opening of a new mall. There's a lot of red flags, right? You're like out there, you're like, wow, I mean, it looks like one big red flag to me, and so it's kind of like, being able to see that and accept that. But the problem is there's all these red flags with that person because if there wasn't red flags, they wouldn't have to future fake. Okay, it's about the whole concept of being okay in their own skin, okay? You're not having to create this false narrative. You're not having to paint a picture. You're not having to sell a new reality to somebody to get them to deal with your crap, right? Or to get them to keep dealing with your timeline that doesn't seem to add up, but heck, it's still there. And so somebody just keeps holding on, okay? And for example, if somebody's dealing with somebody that has, let's just say, a personality disorder or an alcohol addiction or another type of addiction, what have you, and every time there's an argument or fight, the next day, oh, I want to have kids with you, or I want to do this with you. And so you're painting this future faking concept of something changing, of things getting better. And I think that we put so much stock into different things. For example, for many people, having children makes them think of, going to little league games and doing this and taking care of the kids. And, and then your mind plays tricks with you. So if your wife's an alcoholic, but she wants to have kids, she'll stop drinking, she'll get better, things will get easier. All those things start tying in and you start buying into the narrative, right? You start buying into that narrative that you're creating. Not only are they feeding you part of the narrative, you're also feeding yourself part of the narrative, which is also getting in the way of us being able to see the truth, being able to move on, being able to see the red flags in a constant basis in the day-to-day life. I find that, that's a big deal. So whether it's the small things like the vacation or the buying things or the house or the cars or the marriage or the children. And then you have the other concepts that are very interesting is like this concept of this general success. Like I'm going to be this multimillionaire, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to have this job, or this is going to be my title, or I'm going to be a CEO, or I'm going to be a well-known lawyer, or whatever it looks like. And so somebody's sitting there going, oh, wow, my spouse is going to be this very talented, successful person. And so things are going to come my way. And maybe I didn't grow up with much or what have you. And so things are going to change. And you start creating that narrative around the situation too. And I see this happen a lot with many people in my clientele. They've gone through this future faking and it's taken years and years and years to analyze the situation to see it for what it truly is. And this is what's really hard to deal with. And I think also many of us have been trained growing up in our family dynamic with mother and dad. No matter how great mom was, no matter how great dad was, there was definitely some future faking. I'm sure there was definitely some future faking about, anything from vacations to maybe, buying a house or changing schools or whatever it looks like. There was something there. Also, I think, too, we're always trying to jump through hoops for mom and dad. Many of us with codependent backing. I know I'm in rehab for codependency. I'm constantly working on that. And so I'm in recovery, you might say. But, in that process, you're always trying to make good. You're always trying to make them happy. And I think a lot of times in that situation when you're walking on eggshells or you're trying to get this or you're trying to do that, you have a tendency of following that pattern in relationships. And also, many of you out there, and like myself at one point, you take people for face value. You take them for what they say. You don't look past it. And so, one of the biggest things about understanding future faking is having discernment. Discernment is one of those major concepts. It's not about being woke. We're not being woke. Woke to me is literally the asleep folks here in our society today are all woke. Okay. I mean, come on. But discernment is being able to see through things. Discernment is being able to be aware. Discernment is able to say, okay, hey, I might have this desire or this narrative of what I want things to look like, but I can actually see through that narrative and analyze the situation. I can see through that narrative and I can see where I'm playing a role on deceiving myself. I can see through this narrative and I can see where they're playing a role deceiving me. And I think as long as we are open to the fact of, hey, I can see things, I'm not just considering this picture that's being painted and I'm so far up in this picture, this film, this movie, whatever I've created, this alternative narrative that I can actually see straight in my life. And I think it's very interesting. I think we do it to ourselves sometimes too. Like the future faking of when I have this much money, I'll be happy. When I have this house, I'm going to finally feel comfortable. When I have this job or this title, I'll finally decide to settle down because then I can settle down and I'll have this time for someone else because I have this title or I have this job or I have this thing. And again, that's future faking to yourself. And many of us do that as well. We future fake with ourselves. We do this. And I want you to catch those things. The times when you say you'll be happy when, you'll be content when, you'll be safe when, you can add this into your life when. These are all big red flags, personal red flags. And this is all self-sabotage because, it's not like you're going to be like, oh, wow, I hit that milestone. Now I can relax. You know, everything that I've seen pretty much 99.9% of the time is, okay, they make this much money. Now that's not enough money. I got to make this much money. Now that's not enough money. I got to make this much money. Or this title's not good enough, or this level's not good enough, or this salary's not good enough, or this career's not good enough. So it's always constant stepping stone, and it's also self-sabotage because we're sabotaging ourselves saying, we keep moving, the goalposts, keep moving the goalposts. And so you may be future faking yourself. You may be future faking someone else. You may be in a situation where someone is future faking you. You could be doing all three, right? And so that's something that I really want us to look at. So I want you to analyze your situation, analyze your relationships. Where am I right now with the future faking? Am I doing it to myself? And I have been known to do that too. And I've had to really work on that is once I get here, I'll feel better about that. Or once I hit this many subscribers on YouTube, that'll be good. You know what I mean? And that doesn't ever work because once you hit a certain amount, now you want to hit more because you're trying to get the message out there. But at some point in time, you have to be accepting of the message you're giving. You have to be happy about what you're putting out there. You have to feel contentment and peace of mind with what you're doing. And you have to feel success within yourself. It doesn't matter what everybody else thinks about you. You have to actually find that success, that connection, that depth within yourself to define yourself. And that's what's so interesting. I want you to also look outside of yourself when you're in relationships, whether it's a parent dynamic or a partner in work or a romantic partner or what have you. I need you to start analyzing those relationships. Are there things that I'm holding on to and waiting for? What are those things? How am I waiting? What am I waiting for? What do I think I'm going to get? What is my narrative that I'm looking at? What is the current situation now? And what is the narrative that I'm buying into? What is the current situation now? And what is the narrative that I'm buying into? And I want you to look at that personally and with other people because that will be a telltale sign because I do think that many of us are holding ourselves back or we're believing something and we're overlooking lots of red flags in an effort to get that thing, that scenario, that movie, that clip that we want our life to look at. And if you go a step further and look at the narrative that you've created or the narrative that's been created for you and the one that you're buying into, why is that appealing so much to you? What is the connection with that appeal? And that's going to really help you dig deep into what you feel is missing from your life. What is the things that you feel are missing from your life? And why is this going to fulfill it for you? Why? These are the things I want you to think about. Okay, if this happens in my life, why do I feel so fulfilled? If this happens in my life, why am I overlooking all this stuff that's going over here? Just because if I can get that, that's going to change my life. And these are the things that I want us to analyze in our life. And this podcast is actually going to be short because I don't think you need a long podcast. You don't need a lot of conversation about this. This is really a direct thought about your life. I need you to really dig deep and find this because all this stuff, if we want certain things, we got to get it. If we want it, we got to get it. But we don't want to be waiting on something that's not going to be happening. We don't want to wait on that pinwheel of death. We want to reset that computer. And that's what we're doing right now. We're resetting the hard drive. We're resetting our computer. We're turning it back on. We're working through this and we're saying, okay, what in my life do I want to keep? What do I want to change? What am I living by a false narrative about? Why am I living for that? And what can I do within myself to change that? And that's one of the biggest things that I realized is that usually when we're buying into future faking, we're feeling that we don't have personal power of our own. That's the first problem. We do have personal power. We are able to take control. We are able to take control of our life. We are able to do that. We are in charge of our own destiny. So we need to understand, why am I in fear? Or why do I feel like somebody outside of myself can provide me peace or can provide the lifestyle that I want? Okay, because that's also going to put us in a bad situation because we're giving all that power to that other individual. There has to be a two-way street here. We don't want to give a bunch of power to somebody else. And especially if they're future faking you into staying with them, doing nasty, horrible things to you in the process, being neglectful and mean or mentally unstable, all in the process, and keep telling you about this narrative, like what's going to happen down the road. They keep kicking the can down the road, thinking as long as I can get them looking at that narrative, that this is still a possibility, they're going to overlook this, and that, and I had a client recently who was like, yeah, I kept believing the future faking, and I was spending all this money and she, was this or that or this or that. Or I was paying off her bills or I was taking care of this, but this was never coming to fruition. But also when you step back, you realize that person was never doing any work to get to that level. They were never doing any of the, the work or the anything that needs to get to that place. So it's like we're talking about this concept, but we're not working to get there. And so that's also a cue to say, maybe this is future faking, and I need you to see it for what it is, because I have been in a position where I wanted something so badly that I overlooked all the red flags. And I also need you to realize, too, when you're doing it to yourself, because if we are able to follow a narrative of somebody else, we have to create that in our own mind, too. It can't just be that person, because otherwise we'd be ruled by that person. They'd be like, ooh, and so that can't happen. So there has to be some part that we're playing in it. And I've usually found that if we're giving our power outside of ourselves, we're in fear of something, we're in fear of not getting something, we feel like this person can help us and we can't help ourselves. We're taking ourselves out of the loop of power, and we got to really step back in and say, why am I doing this? Where are my fears coming from? And how can I balance this? And for yourself, like, stop kicking the can down the road for happiness or being at peace. It's like you're either at peace or you're not. You're either going to get right with yourself or not. The amount of money or the value of the house or whatever is not going to change that. If anything, the more expenses you have, the less you're going to be connected to yourself, the less you're going to be aware of your feelings and thoughts, the less you're going to connect with yourself because you're so overwhelmed because you have so many things to pay for and things are getting a little tough. And so we need to look at things honestly instead of kicking that can down the road, getting more mindful, getting more discernment in our day-to-day life. And so think about it. Where can you have more discernment in your relationships? What are some things that you're taking for face value that you need to question? What are some narratives that you've caught yourself kind of following down that you might need to change? What are some things within yourself that you need to let go because they're not giving you any sort of power or peace of mind? You're just saying, hey, once I get there, I'll get this, but there's no evidence to that. You're just basically kicking the can down the road of your happiness. And so again, future faking, if we listen to someone else future faking and we buy into that, that's self-sabotage. If we're future faking and we buy into it, that's self-sabotage, right? And if we're having it on both sides, that can feel very overwhelming. It can feel very manipulative, and also can feel a bit gaslighting to a degree, because it's almost like we're gaslighting ourselves, because there's a part of us that realizes that this probably won't come to pass or this isn't going to happen. And then there's a part that's trying to override that, saying, no, I want to live in this illusion for as long as I can. And the problem with that is that a lot of times when we live in this illusion, eventually the reality, hits us very, very hard, like a ton of bricks, and we see all the time that we've wasted in that illusion. And those are the things that we really need to analyze in our life. If you haven't already, check out the YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, put in Ashley Burgess. You can put in Life Coach Ashley Burgess. Go on and subscribe if you haven't already. We put out at least 2 videos every week. I'm interested to hear your concepts or what thoughts that you have or some video concepts that you would like me to address. We're almost at 200,000 subscribers, so please subscribe and comment on the videos and let me know. As well as go to the website, ashleyburgess.com, ashleyberges.com. You can set up a coaching session right online. And you can also contact me. You can go to the contact page and send me an email. I'll get back to you within 72 hours. You can set up a coaching session. Just go to the coaching page and you can just click my name and you can set up a coaching session right there, 30, 60, or 90 minutes. In the meantime, think about it. Where in your life are you dealing with future faking? How is the future faking impacting you? And what can you do to change that to get your life back on order, to see the truth, to not be taken by a narrative, and to put yourself back in the driver's seat, back in the power position, eliminating fear, but also taking your power back. No, you don't need to give your power to anybody but yourself, and these future faking relationships are taking your power from you with something that is never going to be fulfilled, something that's never going to happen. It's never going to come down the path. That is something that they've been using to trick you as long as they can to keep you, because in honesty, that's not going to happen. And they're hoping that you just kind of sweep it under the rug and allow it to never happen. And the same goes for yourself. If you're doing this to yourself, remember, we have to stop this chain of events, because that's not a healthy pattern of living. Being able to see our value and work on that and being in the moment and having discernment is where we want to be. I hope this short podcast has helped you really analyze the areas of future faking in your life. Check out the YouTube channel, go to the website. And by the way, you don't forget to live your true life. And I hope you've had a good time on this podcast listening, and the Ashley Burgess podcast will be back next week. Have a good one. Take care.